In a striking intersection of art politics and international law, two men have been charged with stalking a Los Angeles artist who has openly criticized the Chinese government, specifically President Xi Jinping. Federal prosecutors unveiled the charges against Cui Guanghai, a 43-year-old Chinese national, and John Miller, a 63-year-old British national residing in the U.S. The case underscores the lengths to which some individuals may go to silence dissent, particularly when it intersects with the sensitive arena of U.S.-China relations. The artist, whose identity remains undisclosed but is known for provocative sculptures of Xi and his wife, was the target of a harassment campaign orchestrated by Cui and Miller. Their plan allegedly involved placing a tracking device on the artist's car and attempting to damage his sculptures. Actions that prosecutors described as part of a broader strategy to intimidate him ahead of a planned protest during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco in November 2023. The sculptures, which depict the couple in a vulnerable state, reflect the artist's critical stance against the regime, making him a target for reprisal. In an unexpected twist, the duo unknowingly engaged two undercover FBI agents whom they hired to execute their plans. Court documents reveal that Cui and Miller also attempted to smuggle sensitive U.S. military technology into China, including advanced air defense systems and cryptographic devices. Prosecutors allege that the pair discussed concealing this technology within ordinary consumer goods in an effort to evade detection. Cui and Miller's activities were not only a blatant violation of U.S. laws but also indicative of the broader tensions in U.S.-China relations. Dan Bongino, the FBI's deputy director, emphasized the implications of the case, stating the defendants allegedly plotted to harass and interfere with an individual who criticized the actions of the People's Republic of China while exercising their constitutionally protected free speech rights within the United States. Following their indictment by a federal grand jury on charges of interstate stalking and conspiracy, the two men were apprehended in Serbia. U.S. authorities have expressed their intention to seek extradition, illustrating the complexities of international law enforcement when dealing with transnational harassment and espionage cases. As of now, it remains unclear whether either defendant has secured legal representation. The ramifications of this case extend beyond the immediate legal consequences for Cui and Miller. It raises pressing questions about the safety of dissenting voices, particularly those targeting powerful figures within authoritarian regimes. The incident also highlights the ongoing struggle faced by artists and activists in navigating a complex geopolitical landscape where freedom of expression can be met with severe retaliation. As the world watches how this case unfolds, it serves as a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between artistic expression and political power. The future of this artist and others like him, as well as the broader implications for U.S.-China relations, will depend on both legal outcomes and the international community's response to such acts of intimidation. In a striking case that highlights the intersection of art politics and international tensions, two men have been charged with stalking a Los Angeles artist who has openly criticized Chinese President Xi Jinping. The defendants, Cui Guanghai, a 43-year-old from China, and John Miller, a 63-year-old British national residing in the U.S., allegedly engaged in a harassment campaign aimed at silencing the artist, whose identity has not been disclosed. This case underscores the lengths to which some individuals may go in an attempt to suppress dissent, particularly in the context of geopolitical rivalries. According to federal prosecutors in Los Angeles, the harassment plot was intricately linked to the artist's intentions to protest against President Xi during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC Summit in San Francisco in November 2023. The artist had reportedly created provocative sculptures of Xi and his wife depicting them kneeling bare-chested and with their hands bound, an artistic statement intended to critique the Chinese government's human rights record. The defendants allegedly orchestrated a scheme that included placing a tracking device on the artist's car and attempting to slash its tires. Additionally, they planned to destroy the artist's sculptures, a plan that ultimately failed. Notably, Cui and Miller unwittingly hired two undercover FBI agents to execute their plans, which led to their arrest. Both men are currently in custody in Serbia and U.S. authorities are pursuing extradition. The United States will seek extradition of Cui and Miller and looks forward to working in partnership with the Republic of Serbia's Prosecutors Office and the Ministry of Justice, stated prosecutors. They emphasized the seriousness of the charges, which include interstate stalking, conspiracy, and violations of the Arms Export Control Act. The indictment returned by a federal grand jury on May 30 reflects a broader concern regarding the protection of free speech within the United States, particularly in cases involving foreign influence. Dan Bongino, the FBI's deputy director, remarked, "The defendants allegedly plotted to harass and interfere with an individual who criticized the actions of the People's Republic of China while exercising their constitutionally protected free speech rights." In addition to the stalking charges, Cui and Miller were implicated in an attempt to illegally export sensitive U.S. military technology to China. Court documents revealed that they sought to acquire restricted military equipment, including air defense radar and cryptographic devices, with plans to smuggle these items concealed within consumer products. This dual agenda of harassment and espionage illustrates a concerning trend of foreign actors attempting to undermine U.S. dissidents while simultaneously seeking to gain access to advanced technology. As the situation unfolds, it raises critical questions about the protection of artists and activists who speak out against oppressive regimes. The international community is likely to watch closely as the U.S. government navigates the complexities of extradition and the broader implications for free speech and human rights advocacy. Looking ahead, this case may serve as a catalyst for heightened discussions about the challenges faced by dissidents in an increasingly interconnected world. It underscores the necessity for robust protections for those who dare to voice dissent, particularly against powerful foreign governments. As the legal proceedings continue, it remains to be seen how both the U.S. judicial system and the international diplomatic landscape will respond to the intertwined issues of artistic expression, personal safety, and geopolitical tensions. In a pivotal moment for global economics, the United States and China have re-engaged in trade negotiations, with both nations keen to resolve ongoing tensions that have threatened not only their bilateral relations but also the stability of the global market. The talks held in central London mark a significant development following a recent phone call between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, which both leaders described as productive. The discussions, which began on June 9, 2025, involve a high-level delegation from the U.S. led by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent alongside Chinese Vice Premier Hou Lifeng. The agenda for this round of talks prominently features the contentious issue of rare earth exports, which are critical for manufacturing advanced technologies including smartphones and electric vehicles. China's dominance in this sector, producing about 69% of the world's rare earths, places it in a strategically advantageous position. U.S. officials have expressed a desire for China to expedite the release of these essential materials, which have faced export restrictions in recent months. "We want the rare earths, the magnets that are crucial for cell phones and everything else, to flow just as they did before the beginning of April," said Kevin Hassett, head of the National Economic Council, underscoring the urgency of resolving these trade barriers. Despite a temporary truce reached in mid-May, tensions have escalated, with both countries accusing each other of breaching agreements. The U.S. claims that China has not sufficiently allowed rare earth exports, while Beijing contends that Washington has restricted sales of essential technologies including semiconductors and AI-related products. The stakes are particularly high as the two economies represent approximately 40% of the global GDP, and any prolonged conflict could have far-reaching implications for economic growth worldwide. In a climate of cautious optimism, U.S. officials emerged from the first day of talks with upbeat yet vague assessments. Treasury Secretary Bessent described the meeting as good, while Lutnick referred to it as fruitful. President Trump, reflecting on the discussions, acknowledged the complexities of negotiating with China, stating, "China's not easy, but I'm only getting good reports." The anticipation of a big, strong handshake at the conclusion of the talks suggests that both nations are poised to make concessions, particularly on the issue of rare earths. However, the US has indicated it intends to maintain restrictions on the most advanced computer chips. The backdrop to these negotiations is a growing concern over the impact of tariffs on both economies. Recent data revealed a significant drop in U.S. imports from China, a 28.5% decline in May year-over-year, resulting from the escalating tariffs which peaked at 145%. Economists have warned that Trump's aggressive trade policies could slow global growth. With the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) adjusting its forecast down to a modest 2.9%. As discussions continue, both nations are leveraging their control over critical materials as a means of exerting influence in the trade war. The U.S. has begun requiring export licenses for ethane, a vital gas used in plastic manufacturing that China heavily relies on. Conversely, China's recent curbs on rare earth exports have sparked alarm, particularly among automakers who depend on these materials for vehicle production. With major companies like Ford halting production due to supply shortages, the urgency for a resolution is palpable. Looking ahead, the outcome of these talks could redefine the future of U.S.-China relations and set the tone for global trade. With a July 9 deadline looming for the U.S. to finalize tariffs with the UK and ongoing negotiations with India, the pressure is mounting for both sides to reach an agreement. As the world watches closely, the implications of these discussions extend far beyond trade tariffs. They signal a broader narrative about cooperation and competition in an increasingly interconnected global economy. In a stark warning delivered at the 2025 Shangri-La Dialogue, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth articulated the growing urgency surrounding China's military ambitions towards Taiwan. The situation has escalated to a point where distinguishing between military exercises and actual preparations for conflict has become increasingly difficult. Admiral Samuel Papero, commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in DOPACOM, described the current state of affairs as a rapid boil, noting a staggering 300% annual increase in Chinese military pressure on Taiwan. This dramatic escalation is an alarming manifestation of Beijing's intent to potentially assert forceful control over the island by 2027. As outlined by President Xi Jinping, the implications of such heightened military activity are profound. As tensions rise, the United States finds itself at a disadvantage in terms of timely response and operational readiness. U.S. Transportation Command Transcom has identified significant weaknesses in its sustainment strategy, further complicating the ability to deter aggression across the Taiwan Strait, a critical objective for U.S. foreign policy. Admiral Papero emphasized that the Chinese military's actions are not merely exercises, they represent dress rehearsals for forced unification, highlighting a deliberate strategy to normalize military presence around Taiwan and diminish its response capabilities. Recent data from Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense underscores this trend, revealing an increase in People's Liberation Army (PLA) sorties across the Taiwan Strait's median line from 953 incidents in 2021 to 3,070 in 2024. This persistent military pressure forces Taiwan to either allocate more resources to counter incursions or risk ceding control of its airspace to the PLA, thereby shortening the warning time for any potential invasion. The operational tempo of the PLA significantly challenges U.S. strategic interests in the region. With the PLA's growing capabilities and the geographical advantages it holds, the United States must reassess its military posture in the Indo-Pacific. Current logistical constraints mean that U.S. forces primarily based in the continental United States face significant challenges in deploying assets rapidly in response to an escalating crisis. In light of these challenges, U.S. policymakers are urged to adopt a multi-pronged strategy to bolster military presence and readiness in the region. Hegseth emphasized the necessity of strengthening U.S. military partnerships in the Indo-Pacific, particularly through status of forces agreements (SOFAs) that could facilitate an expanded U.S. presence in allied nations. Such arrangements could allow for the pre-positioning of military assets and personnel, enhancing operational flexibility in response to PLA provocations. Additionally, increasing the tempo of U.S. military operations in the Indo-Pacific is essential. Regular invisible military campaigning can serve as a deterrent while enhancing the readiness of U.S. forces and their allies. This could involve more frequent joint exercises and deployments, which would not only deter Chinese aggression but also improve the operational capabilities of U.S. and partner forces. Finally, leveraging the recently renegotiated compacts of free association COFA with nations such as Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands could be pivotal. By developing operational sites within these agreements, the U.S. can establish a more formidable presence in the Western Pacific, ensuring rapid access to critical locations close to Taiwan. As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, the urgency of these measures cannot be overstated. The evolution of Chinese military strategy, coupled with internal pressures faced by Xi Jinping's administration, creates a volatile environment that could lead to significant conflict if not addressed. The United States must act decisively to reinforce its deterrent posture and ensure it remains capable of responding effectively to any aggressive moves by China. The future of regional stability hinges on the United States' ability to adapt and strengthen its military presence in the Indo-Pacific, with the credibility of its deterrence efforts now more crucial than ever. In the ever-evolving landscape of international relations, recent developments underscore the complexities and challenges facing global diplomacy. As the United States grapples with its foreign policy under President Donald Trump, significant shifts are occurring in the dynamics of U.S.-China relations and the broader geopolitical sphere, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean. LAC. On June 9, 2025, President Trump enacted a new travel ban affecting citizens from 12 countries, a move that has drawn criticism for its perceived cruelty and discrimination. The ban, which is reminiscent of previous travel restrictions, has sparked concerns among human rights advocates and political analysts. Mustafa Bayami, a prominent commentator, described the initiative as a gratuitously cruel sequel to prior policies, emphasizing its impact on communities already strained by aid cuts and economic challenges. The implications of this travel ban extend beyond immediate concerns affecting diplomatic relationships and perceptions of the United States across the globe. For many countries, particularly in Africa, the restrictions signal a retreat from the U.S. as a land of opportunity and a reliable partner. The sentiment among affected populations is one of disillusionment, as expressed by numerous African voices who lament the diminishing prospects for travel and economic engagement with the U.S. Meanwhile, the ongoing tensions between the U.S. and China have led to increased scrutiny of both nations' diplomatic strategies. Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent decision to engage directly with Trump for the first time in 4 months highlights a critical juncture in Sino-American relations. Historically, Chinese leaders have avoided direct communication during times of crisis, which raises questions about the motivations behind Xi's outreach. As Dennis Wilder, a former CIA analyst, notes, Xi's willingness to engage may reflect a strategic shift aimed at navigating the complexities of a relationship fraught with suspicion and rivalry. In conjunction with these developments, China is actively positioning itself as a reliable partner for LAC countries. At a press briefing on June 9, 2025, Zhang Run, the Director General of the Department of Latin American and Caribbean Affairs at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, reaffirmed China's commitment to fostering mutual development and upholding global fairness. He outlined the outcomes of the recent fourth ministerial meeting of the China-CELAC Forum, where initiatives for cooperation were discussed, including a joint action plan for the years 2025 to 2027. Zhang emphasized the importance of LAC nations as integral members of the Global South, combating unilateralism and promoting multipolarity in international relations. Trade between China and LAC countries reached an impressive $518.4 billion in 2024, demonstrating the growing economic interdependence between the regions. This development is indicative of China's broader strategy to enhance its influence in the Western Hemisphere, countering the narrative pushed by certain countries that seek to undermine China's presence. As geopolitical tensions intensify, the resilience of China-LAC relations may serve as a counterbalance to U.S. influence in the region. Zheng's assertion that China will always be the LAC's reliable partner reflects a commitment to mutual support devoid of the zero-sum game mentality that often characterizes great power politics. In conclusion, as the United States navigates its foreign policy landscape under Trump's administration, the ramifications of its actions are felt not only domestically but across the globe. The growing ties between China and LAC nations signal a potential shift in the balance of power as countries increasingly assert their strategic independence. The coming months will be crucial in determining how these dynamics evolve, particularly as nations respond to the challenges posed by unilateral actions and seek to forge cooperative frameworks that promote stability and development in an increasingly interconnected world.